Welcome back to Farwest Cuisine, the only cooking show where our experts on Far West bring you all of our best cooking expertise directly to you on YouTube free of charge. I'm your host, Patrick. I'm taking over from last season's host, Fergus Grimwold, who unfortunately is no longer with us. But that footage, we're still working through the red tape, but hopefully we will have last season up very soon. But it is difficult working with his estate. It's difficult getting through the red tape. But anyway, this season we have a lot of special dishes that we want to share with you, including the dish for today, the Asparagus Macaroni Loaf, a dish that was named within the top 300 dishes in all of America, 1967 America's Best Eats Cookbook. It is in my top 10 loaves, and I'm a man who considers myself very experienced in loaf making. So let us look at our ingredients and let us see what we can do. Every loafer knows that the best way to start an asparagus macaroni loaf is with the Alpine blend of Gruyere cheese. After you've got your Gruyere cheese, you always want to go immediately into Bob's Red Mill non-fat dry milk powder. It is the only non-fat dry milk powder made by Bob's Red Mill, and of course Bob's Red Mill is not a sponsor of the show. For this dish we're going to use eggs, chicken eggs. This is the one right here. We are also going to use red bell pepper, because as the saying goes, when life gives you red bell pepper, you make asparagus macaroni loaf. It's butter. Kraft macaroni. Kraft macaroni. Kraft macaroni. Kraft macaroni. Salt and pepper. And of course, you can't make an asparagus macaroni loaf without a little flour. This is, from what I understand, so I was at the grocery store picking up our flour, and I had a little bit of time because they have no idea how to run an establishment, so the lines were very long, and I was talking to the manager, and I asked him, I said, where do you get this flour from? And he told me, and I can't believe this, I don't know how many people know, he says it comes from a grass called wheat. It is not actually from a flour. So make sure when you get your flour that you ask where this came from, because you might end up with some dirty grass trash like this. And of course, asparagus. All the ingredients have been introduced. We are almost ready to start cooking. We just got to get everything out of these packages, and then we will be one step closer to tasting my succulent loaf. So let's grab a bowl. Let's get these macaronis out of this box. What a lot of people don't know about macaroni is it is actually a Japanese pasta, macaroni, and it comes from the elbow region of Japan. And another thing that's interesting about macaroni is that it is one of the few pastas that they can actually just cut it straight off the top of the plant, and it doesn't hurt the plant, so it's very sustainable. This is a cheese packet, but since we have the Alpine Gruyere blend, we do not need this. I actually wish they would not include this. Kraft, if you're listening, it's your warning. You're up too much. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to put this into the pot. I wish they sold them in bigger packages. You know, these are family sized, but I don't know how big the average size family is, because I feel like my son eats a lot of macaroni. He's a macaroni boy, and I don't think this would keep him satisfied. I think that this is more of a individual serving, but this is what this box right here is all that our local grocery store had. So, you know, you make do with what you have. You know, sometimes life gives you substandard shopping options, and you know, it's not my shame. It's a shame on Whole Foods, it's a shame on Safeway, and it's a shame on Fred Meyer, to be honest. So anyway, this is our macaroni. Very natural. This is one of the absolute most natural pastas that a human can consume. In fact, a lot of people say a diet of macaroni leads to a good life. So we get this up to a high heat, and once this comes to a boil, we'll go ahead and toss the macaroni into the pot. But first, we need to start our sauce. well, it's more of like a glaze, but when it comes to loafing, there's not really a distinction between sauces and glazes because nobody really dips their loaf in sauce. Nobody wants a wet loaf, basically, is where I'm going with this. Anyway, so you mix in some of your Gruyere cheese blend. You will mix in a little bit of flour, which we have already pre-prepared. You'll need some salt, and you will need some pepper. And you will also need, of course, Bob's Red Mill non-fat dry milk powder. The only non-fat dry milk powder that this company makes. This is literally the only one. It is $10 a bag. We had no other option. We have no budget, so this better be good. So we will take a little bit of our powder. Don't make it easy, you know? There we go. You get our measuring cups, and always consult the blackboard. 1/2 of a cup of instant non-fat dry powdered milk, which means that these are worthless because we will be using this cup measurer. So we will go ahead and mix in 1/2 cup. I went ahead and used the, this is a special liquid cup measurer. Not exactly the best call when using dry products, but I have no one to answer to. It's my damn kitchen. If you want to use a dry cup measurer, that's on you. So we go ahead and add that to our bowl. We go ahead and add our flour. These have suddenly redeemed themselves because we are going to use these for the salt and pepper. Once again, checking the board for 1 tablespoon teaspoon of salt. That would have been awful. But instead, we are definitely going to use 1 teaspoon of salt. Nobody likes a salty loaf, you know what I mean? You always want to make sure that your loaf, the primary flavor, is savory, because a savory loaf saves families. My minister taught me that, and it was a hard lesson to learn. Lost a lot of loved ones before I knew that. And of course, just a little bit of pepper. You don't want to add too much pepper. Some people like pepper. I do not like pepper. I wouldn't be using it if it wasn't for the fact the recipe called for it. And then, of course, your Gruyere cheese, which we use 3 ounces here. And the best way to measure Gruyere cheese is, of course, just by hand. You just want to free ball it when it comes to Gruyere. Because, like they say, you can't go wrong with Gruyere. So I'm going to go ahead and toss almost all of this in. This is a 4-ounce container, so we're going to save a little bit for later. You can give this to your son, give this to your daughter, whatever. It's good for if you want to make like a tiny pizza or something very small. It's good for that. The next step is, of course, adding the eggs and water to what will become the sauce for the loaf. So again, we're going to take 2 of our chicken eggs, and just like children, we are going to slightly beat them. You don't want to overbeat your eggs because that causes them to emulsify, and emulsified eggs don't work quite the same. These are actually brown, kind of natural chicken eggs. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but it does have some stuff floating in it. That's fine. Sometimes you just get floaters in your eggs. It just happens. But it's not going to hurt you. So let me go ahead and throw away these eggshells. I don't want to feel like I'm walking on eggshells the entire time, if you know what I mean. Anyway, so we stir the eggs a little bit. Just beat them very lightly. Again, this doesn't need to be perfect. No one's perfect. I've come to accept that now. Anyway, we add our water and our eggs to the sauce. And now we are going to blend this together a little bit. And there we go. We want to stir this together a little bit, and doesn't that look great? You do want to make sure that you stir this properly because nobody wants chunky loaf sauce. So you want to stir this. And of course, this is going to cook, so it is going to get a little bit softer as it cooks. But you don't want to be using a metal fork into your metal saucepan because you're going to scratch it up. You're going to ruin that pan. So we're going to take a little bit of time, and when we come back, we are going to be getting ready to cook our macaroni, which should be boiling by then, and then we're going to start rendering our sauces. Okay, so now we have our water at boiling temperature, so we are going to go ahead and add our macaroni. And while we wait for this macaroni to boil, make sure you get all that Kraft goodness. We didn't spend $4 for nothing. And we'll go ahead and take our sauce, and we're going to add this to a small saucepan We're going to cook this on a lower heat because you do not want to burn your cheese. Burnt cheese is one of the absolute worst flavors in the entire animal kingdom. So we're going to set this here. We're going to turn this on. Anytime that wants to go ahead and light, that'd be good. Okay, I guess we'll change. Go ahead and change spots here because sometimes, you know, sometimes different pans work differently. So, okay, so this is going to boil. We're going to have that macaroni nice and soft, and it's going to stick deep into the loaf, and it's going to be delicious. In the meantime, we're going to take this sauce, we're going to render it at a lower temperature, probably a medium, just so we get that cheese to melt. And then once this is cooked, we are going to mix it with the sauce, and then it's loaf time. So now we need to prep our asparagus. And something that is interesting about asparagus is a lot of people consider asparagus to be the weapon of the vegetable world because, of course, they come in spears. But I've always thought that was a little bit weird because, you know, chili peppers are what I would consider to be the weapons of the vegetable world because they use those to make, you know, like anti-rape self-defense spray. And it's one of those things that if you were to ask me, if all you have is an asparagus spear and some freak comes after you, you're definitely going to want pepper spray instead of the asparagus spears. So that's my recommendation. That's the official Far West. Buy the pepper spray. Don't trust self-defense to a vegetable. So anyway, so now we have our asparagus. And the key to prepping asparagus is all in the delivery. Asparagus is ready. Now that we have our asparagus ready, we have our macaroni boiling, we have our sauce rendering down. The final step is to prepare our bell pepper, and if you look at our blackboard, you will see that our recipe actually called for pimento. But once again, the local shop has let us down. They did not have pimento. We asked them, they said, we don't serve that here, and I said, what's that over your shoulder? And they said, that is a pimento. And I said, is that available? And they said, no, that's just for management. So I don't know what was going on there, but either way, we got a bell pepper. Bell pepper actually complements asparagus pretty well. Bell pepper, it's more of a crunch to it, whereas asparagus is kind of like a soggy, almost like a trash bag feeling to the vegetable. So this will make the dish quite a bit crunchier, which is going to help because that macaroni gets soggy too. It's a soggy dish. It needs that crunch. So we're going to cut these into little slices, little slivers. And a lot of people ask me, oh, you're putting pepper into your loaf. Do you want a spicy loaf? And I tell them, no, it's just red bell pepper, idiot. Like, I'm not going to put an actual spicy pepper into a loaf. This is an amateur hour. So anyway, just keep chopping. You don't have to use the whole pepper. I'm going to use the whole pepper because I'm just going to throw away what's left over anyway. So it just makes sense to chop it up. But if you're making, you know, fajitas or, you know, something of that sort, maybe some stir fry, you can just throw the extra in there and then you'll have a secondary dish. You can serve 2 dishes at dinner and your family will say, wow, really? You cooked 2 dishes? And you just say, no, I just threw the extras in a pot. And I think they'll appreciate that. That's something that you and your family can enjoy together as an experience when you tell them that, you know, you would not cook 2 meals for them. You just cook the one. Okay, so it looks like our macaroni is fully cooked. So we're going to, safety first, take the pot. We're going to strain our macaroni. Here we go. It's a boy. That's good. Get in there, bitch. Okay, and then sometimes you get a little bit of macaroni at the bottom. You just want to scrape that out. You can just throw it away too. It doesn't matter. It's Kraft macaroni. But we are going to save it because we definitely care about the environment and we do not want to waste macaroni. So we're just going to spoon this as much as we can directly into our strainer. Quite a lot of macaroni on the bottom here. So we're just gonna, this little bit, it doesn't matter, nothing matters. So we're just gonna go ahead and switch to rinsing this off, and then we're going to add the sauce, and then we're gonna see the next step. Okay, so we have our pasta almost ready. We're going to mix in the sauce pretty soon, but the first thing we need to do before we do any of that is going to be buttering our loaf pans and adding our vegetables to the bottom. Because if there is anything that we know is wrong is an unbuttered loaf pan with no vegetables. So what you're going to want to do is just take a little bit of sweet butter. You can also use unsalted butter or salted butter. It really doesn't matter. Butter's butter, you know. So you take this, you butter your pan. I use a lot of butter. You know, some people say that butter is bad for you, and I don't invite those people back. So we just want to use 2 pans. We are going to have a double loaf night, which is a rare event in my household. We're usually a single loaf family. My children do not like the loaf. My wife hates the loaf. I eat a lot of loaf by myself, basically. But I have guests over and they have no choice but to eat my loaf. So it's a little bit special. So then what you're going to want to do is once you have your pan buttered, you want to make sure it's fully buttered. Looks like I missed a little spot right here. I do not want anything sticking to my loaf pan. So you're going to want to take your asparagus, which in this case, it looks like they did f*** up, and these are not full spears. Instead, these are just little chunklets, but that's fine. You gotta roll with your punches when you're making your loaves, you know what I mean? So you're going to take your bell pepper, you're going to take your asparagus, and you're going to arrange them in an alternating order. Some people will tell you otherwise. Some people will tell you you don't want to use as much bell pepper. Some people will tell you you don't want to use as much asparagus. The people who say you don't want to use as much asparagus, I tell them, why the f*** are you making asparagus macaroni loaf if you don't like asparagus? And those people usually do not have an answer. So that's what it is. But I like to go alternate order. You do get a nice coverage on the top. This dish will be colorful. It is going to be the same colors as the Mexican flag, which is interesting because no part of this dish comes from Mexico. So that's a little bit of trivia. A little bit of trivia for you. Looking at that, our sauce is just about ready. So we're actually going to set this aside. So it's going to finish melting, and then once the pasta is done, we're going to add this together. We're almost into Loaf City, gentlemen. So now we have just finished stirring in our sauce. We had to do it off camera because we needed to do it while it was hot. While both of them were hot, otherwise they would not melt together properly. So we have all of the ingredients for our loaf ready. And if you look over here, we also have our loaf pans prepared. So now it's just a matter of dumping my loaf in the tray. So you just want to get in there, scoop by scoop, step by step, day by day, as they say. So you want to make sure you don't waste any of that sweet, tender loaf. So I'm not going to try to spill as little as possible. It's a little sticky. A little bit of a sticky loaf. Sometimes it's a little hard to get your loaf out, but it'll all come out in the end. So now we finish. And again, this is a recipe my grandfather taught me. My grandfather was not a kind man. Did not cook often, and when he did cook, he was almost always drunk. But in between the bouts of raging alcoholism, he knew his way around a kitchen. And I think that every human being has that kind of beautiful depth within them. You never know which homeless person or vagrant, which cannibal or that you meet on the street can actually serve you up a hot, steamy loaf at the end of the day. And I think that that's something important for all of us, every single person, to remember. Right, now all that is left, now that our loaves are fully prepared, is to preheat the oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit, American numbers. And we will bake this for 50 to 60 minutes, but through the magic of YouTube, it will only take you a few seconds, unless we have a word from our sponsor. And it looks like we are finally done. Our loaf is fully cooked, so let's go ahead, take it out of the oven. Our 2 loaves. Here we go, listen to that sizzle. But of course, the true magic in the loaf isn't when you pull it out of the oven, it's when you plop it down on the tray. So let us go ahead, flip these over one by one. This tray's a little bit small, so gotta shake your loaf. You know, gotta shake that loaf right out. There we go. Look at that. That is beautiful. So what we're gonna do is, ow, I burned myself a little bit, but that's fine, it happens. So we'll go ahead and push this to one side. That is loaf number 1. But as everyone knows, solid loaves come in pairs. So we'll go ahead and we'll dump loaf number 2. We'll try to get this one out a little bit faster so that we get a more solid loaf. Nobody likes liquid loaves. We can't afford oven mitts. We don't have the budget for oven mitts, so I'm sorry. I am sorry we can't afford a mitt, but we do have whatever this is, and you know what? You make do with what you got. That's cooking tip number 1. Dear God, this is not... Okay, there we go. It's all coming together. There we go. Look at that. 2 perfect asparagus macaroni loaves. That wasn't vomit. Anyway, so now the most important step. Our dishes are ready. It's time to share. All right, gentlemen, hope you guys are hungry. Today, we have a very special dish for the very first episode of Season 2 of Farwest Cuisine. We have the Asparagus Macaroni Loaf. I know you're a loaf man, I can tell it from your face, but let's see if both of you guys enjoy this. Okay, sorry about that. Here we go. There you go, a little bit for you. Let's get a little bit more asparagus on that plate. Can you hand me your plate, sir? I'm gonna give you from the second loaf. They're both the same. The ingredients definitely are the same, but there's a little bit of a difference in the toppings. So we'll see if there's a little difference. There you go. Should still be hot. Just came out of the oven, so we'll see if you guys enjoy it.
Brink's quite nice. I'm not sure there's any cheese in here.
It's a lot of cheese. There's a whole container of cheese in there.
It's not bad. It definitely needs some pepper. There's no seasoning in the noodles. And the asparagus is literally a pain to the mouth to eat. I wouldn't even recommend my daughter eating this. Addison, you want a bite? No. Exactly. I don't blame her. Not recommended. Not at all.
Anyway, not everyone's opinion matters. Not everyone knows what they're talking about. This has been the very first episode of Season 2 of Far West Cuisine. We prepared an absolutely delicious dish. Entirely royalty-free. Feel free to make this dish for your family. It's fine. And I can promise that there are no legal or moral issues with this dish. Again, please do not watch Season 1 until we can finally get through that red tape, until we can finally get through the issues with the Grindelwald estate. It is very complicated. But for now, this entire episode is completely fine. You will enjoy it. You will enjoy this dish, despite the moronic ramblings of the absolute gutter trash that we managed to dredge up to review our dish in this episode. I am your host, Patrick, and as always, please enjoy. This has been Far West Cuisine. So a little bit of backstory for where this dish comes from. My grandfather actually served in the military during World War II and was stationed in Japan. And it was around Halloween, and Trick or Treat was coming up. And he had nothing to give away, absolutely nothing, him and my grandmother. But they had a lot of the Japanese pasta known as macaroni. And so they said, you know what? I think children would enjoy Asparagus Macaroni Loaf. But they also said, keep in mind this is their words, not mine. They also said, I don't think Japanese people deserve to receive gifts from us this soon after Pearl Harbor. So what they did is they would write the recipe for this dish onto pieces of paper, and they gave that out as a trick-or-treat gift. And it was, as far as I know, a smashing success.